Nice work. And up next, I would like to tackle the filters. So at this point, we should have the sorting in place so we can display the products and we can sort based on some data. And now, of course, I would want to set up the filters where we can actually control the amount of products that we are displaying. And then, of course, we'll still sort based on some value. Now, when we talk about filters, I would want you to understand that we need to set them up as controlled inputs. So in a state, I'll have some initial value. And then as I'm using the filters, of course, I'll be changing those values in a state. And then based on that, I will filter products. So I'll start by setting up those values, those state values. And even though at the moment, some of them might not make sense, just bear with me. One by one, we'll set up the filters. And then, of course, it's going to be a bit clearer what we're doing. And essentially, I would want to navigate back to the filter context. Notice I have my initial state, correct? I have filter products, I have all products, grid view, and sort. And since there's going to be a bunch of filters, and I only would want to use one function, I'll set up a property which actually is going to be a object in my initial state. So in here, I'll say filters, and then inside of that filters, I will set up those state values. And I'll start with my input, and that one will be text. So again, naming is up to you, but I'm going to go with text, and I'm just going to set this up as empty string. Remember, we have done this before, where we're setting up those controlled inputs. The only thing that I'm doing right now is setting up those default values in the state. And the only difference, of course, is that I already have the state, and I'm setting up as a object. Then right after text, I'm going to go with company. And by default, it's going to be equal to all, because if you take a look at our project, of course, I'm displaying this category as well. So for category, there's going to be a value of all. Then the same is going to be for the company and colors and all that. So I'm going to go with company, and by default, it is going to be equal to all. Then the same is going to be for the category as well as the colors. So let's go here with all. That is just going to be my default value. And let's do the same thing for the color, and that's going to be set to all. Then we're going to have min price, max price, and price. And we'll have to add a little bit more functionality in a second. But as far as the default values, we're going to go with min underscore price is 0. And then max price for the time being will also be 0. And then lastly, the actual price, so the price we're displaying, is also going to be 0. Now, if you're lost a little bit, notice here we have the range input. And in the range input, I would want to display, well, what is the minimal price as well as what is the max price. But this needs to match to whatever I have for my products. So that's important. It's not just a random price. It's actually the max price that I have for my product. And then there's also the actual price that I would like to see. Okay, so for example, if I would want to see items that are less than 1,000, notice how I'm moving the price. So I'll filter based on this price. However, for that range input, I also would want to get the max price from my product. And that's that little bit of work we'll have to do in a second. And then lastly, I also have a shipping, and by default, it's going to be false. Now, when we talk about shipping, of course, I'm talking about this checkbox over here. So by default, that is false. And we're almost done setting up these default values. But like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of work where I would want to map over those products and get the actual price. Now, let's take a step back and think about it. When do we load our product? When we set up the user, correct? When we had our first dispatch. So once the products change, we load our products. And the products are in the payload. All right, so that makes sense. Now let's navigate to filter reducer, and let's just add a little bit of code over here. So once I load those products, I would also want to set up two values in my state, more precisely in my filters. So once I load my product, I would want to map over it, get the highest price, and then just set it up over here as a max price value. And the same I'm going to do for the price. Again, we're doing that because I don't want to add some random value of, for example, 3,000. I actually want to set my max price to be equal to whatever is the max price of the products that are coming in. So let's navigate to filter reducer. And yes, we're returning this type. That still stays the same, but I first would want to get the max price. And we'll simply do that by max price is equal to action payload. Remember, products are in a payload, right? So I'm going to go with map. And for shortness, I'm just going to go with P, which represents the product. And I would want to get all the prices over here. So say price. Now, if you want, we can console log, just so you don't think that I'm cheating over here. I'm going to navigate to the bigger screen. I think it's going to be easier. In here in the console, I should first see the array of 0. Okay, nothing is happening here. But then eventually there's going to be an array of 17 items. And notice here how we're getting these values. And I just need to use the math.max method that comes with JavaScript, where I would want to pass in these values and get me the max one. Now, in the max method, though, we cannot pass in the array. That's why we'll use the spread operator. So the way it's going to look like, I'm going to navigate back. I have my max price, and I'll leave the console log just so we can see that it is for sure working. And we'll just say max price is equal to math, like I said, max. So the math object that is coming with JavaScript, and then we just use the max method. And then, like I said, I cannot pass in that array directly. I need to use my spread operator and then pass the max price. And once you console log, this is going to be that max price. So whatever it is. Now, of course, I can go back, and I believe it was $3,099. So now, of course, what I would want is add this value to my state. More precisely, in the filters, I'll set my max price to be this value, as well as the current price. Because by default, I would want to set up my range where I start with my max price. Notice over here. So this big dot is just going to be set equal to the max. And then, of course, user notice can change. So my max still stays the same. My min always stays 0. But then the price is the value that the user is controlling. So hopefully that makes sense. And in here, I'll remove the console log. And then remember, filters was already a object, correct? So we go here with filters is equal. And now again, I would want to copy the previous values. So I don't want to override it, because if I'll set it up as max price is equal to the price and then the max price, then of course I'll remove the rest of the default values that we worked so hard to add. So it's an object. So I'll say filters is equal to ... state filters. So now, of course, again, we copy the old values, and then we'll change two things. We'll change the max price here. We'll say max price is equal to my variable, my max price. And like I said, the same thing by default, I would want to set up my price. So I'll say here that the price is also equal to the max price. We save this one, and now we could just go to the components. And of course, we're looking in the filter provider. Notice we have the product, we have filtered. That still stays the same, but now we should have the filters. That is my object with my default values. And notice text is empty string. Then I have company category and color set to all. Min price is still 0, but now I have my max price for the max price property as well as the price one. And then, of course, shipping is still false. Awesome. We're done setting up our default values. So now one by one, we'll start setting up our filter inputs over here.